the Adler podcast, and this is truly going to be a special episode. It is my great honor to welcome filmmaker Kyle Edward Ball, whose feature-length debut, Skinamarink, has been a truly impressive hit. Made with a budget of $15,000 and grossing more than $1.5 million, Skinamarink has also premiered on Shudder at the start of this month and has definitely made the rounds on social media, whether it's Reddit, Twitter, and so on. So, Kyle, welcome to our podcast. Thank you for finding the time to join us, and I'll let Franco take over with the questions.
Okay, so that you don't get confused, he's the guy with the black beanie, because we decided to go for the beanie choices.
Everyone's wearing a beanie.
So, first of all, how are you doing, Kyle? How's it going?
I'm doing good. 12, it's noon here, and that's really early for me because I sleep it, but I actually had a decent sleep, but I had one of those sleeps where it was like I wake up, fall asleep, wake up, fall asleep, and that's just how I am. But cumulatively, I got a solid 8 hours.
That's important, because I know what you mean, because I'm the same. I stagger my sleep basically.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start with the interview, and we're gonna start with the first question. This is the quintessential film journalism question that must be asked to all directors.
Yes.
What do you think about pineapple on pizza?
Oh, that's interesting that you've asked this, because Hawaiian pizza, I don't know if you know this, is a Canadian invention.
What?
It's
Oh,
not.
okay.
No, yeah, it's not, because I think even Hawaiians have good enough sense not to put pineapple on pizza. But yeah, it's a Canadian invention, so you have Canada to thank for this. I don't particularly like pineapple on pizza, and I actually I'm like a little kid with my food taste. I only really like cheese pizza and pepperoni. I will tolerate a meat lovers or a vegetarian pizza. I will tolerate toppings on pizza, but at the end of the day, I only really like cheese or pepperoni because I have the taste of like a 4-year-old. But so yeah, I do not like pineapple on pizza. If I were to expand my horizons to say, I like all kinds of pizza, I still don't think I would like Hawaiian, just because I don't really like pineapple in general.
Off what a good start now, but basically,
Yeah.
he's also hitting us with the trivia. Usually I'm the trivia guy.
Yeah.
We wanted to ask you, have you seen any movies recently that you were said, that's interesting?
I haven't had a big opportunity to watch a lot of movies because I've been so busy with my movie. And also, I've talked with other people in the film industry recently, and they've said, yeah, that happens to me too. And also, it starts to feel like homework.
Oh,
But, seriously, I did watch Jane Shoburn's going to the World's Fair for the first time a few weeks ago and loved it. And it really surprised me too, because I take things so literally. I thought it was I don't want to spoil anything, but it doesn't go in the direction you think it is in the end. And it's actually a surprisingly sweet, sincere movie. So I really like that. And then outside of that, I think the last movie that I saw for the first time, must have been months before that. I don't watch movies as much as I would like. I've been wanting to watch Ghost Watch forever, and I haven't even gotten around to that. And it's easy to get online. I rewatched Barbarella for the fourth or fifth time the other night. And then I rewatched The Birds for the third time this month.
Okay.
So cumulatively maybe 20 times, but yeah.
Okay. Would you say that's your favorite Hitchcock?
Yeah, I would say it's between Psycho and The Birds. And I like
Okay.
Vertigo, but I don't think it's quite a, yeah.
Ooh, shots fired, Andrea. He likes Vertigo more.
We had the
Well,
discussion
like
like a couple of weeks ago.
I'm a man of simple taste.
By the way, the Edward's Fair is also, I think they call it like COVID films, right? Because it was just filmed on a webcam, if I'm not mistaken. It is in my radar, basically.
It actually wasn't, because so a lot of it is filmed in the webcam, but then they perspective switch in parts where it's just filmed like a traditional film. So it jumps out of out and into to the webcam. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, so now we're going to go down to your movies. So, okay, what made you decide to go, screw it, I'm making a YouTube channel and then I'm going to make a movie? What was the thing that sparked?
Yeah, so in my early 20s, I graduated film school. I had a brief tryst with a local music video director who was kind of a big deal. And like, long story short, that experience didn't work out. And I was incredibly disenchanted by things. I tried my hands at 2 short films that didn't really pan out either. All horror, by the way. And then one day I came up with the idea of recreating people's nightmares. The channel amassed a reasonable following, but never really made it big. But while doing those nightmare videos, I learned who I was as a filmmaker, learned what I was good at, learned what I was bad at, learned the way I like to do things differently. And also because people were commenting nightmares, they were subconsciously telling me what scared them. After doing that for about 3 or 4 years, I decided, okay, maybe it's time to start seriously exploring doing a feature. I had a vague idea for a feature. I thought, before I do it, I'll do a proof of concept, like as a stepping stone. I did the proof of concept. It's a short film called Heck, which, oddly enough, I've just signed a deal to have released on VHS. So through a company called, I don't think I should say the company because I think they want to do an announcement, blah, blah, blah. But I finished that short. That short didn't really go anywhere, but I really liked it, and I felt I had achieved my purpose, even if it didn't get into any film festivals. So a pandemic happened. I was laid off for my job for a bit. Then I came back to my job, and my job was completely different than how I left it. So previously at my job, I sold video equipment for years, and it was so I have schizophrenia, and previously my job was maybe something that someone with schizophrenia could manage. And then after I came back to my job was so different. They had laid off half the staff. They changed all these things that it became clear that it wasn't a job that a person with schizophrenia could do.
That's cool.
So I was laid off from my job again, and I thought, okay, I'm laid off. I have unemployment coming in. Maybe I could start writing my movie. So I just sat down and wrote my movie. There was other things too, like 30 was coming up too, and I said, okay, I have a window of being the cool young filmmaker, but that window eventually will start closing. And which, like, 29, 30, that's like baby and director's years, but it's not always going to be that way. And at some point I won't be able to capitalize on, oh, look at this young cool filmmaker. At some point I'll just be a filmmaker, right? So, like, try to get a feature out now while the window is still, like, wide open. So I got a script written. It took a very long time to write the script. I would say like 4 or 5 months thinking about it. And this is on top of a year plus of like batting around my head and doing a proof of concept short. And then it only took about 3 months to actually write it. Then I went to work on pre-production, development. We applied for grants. We didn't get the grants, so we did a crowdfund. And then I went to work shooting it. It only took about 7 days to shoot. Okay. But that was because we had planned everything that way. And then it took about 5-6 months to edit.
Okay.
Then I posted a trailer even before the finished cut was done to Reddit. And ever since I posted the trailer to Reddit, I think it was maybe around Christmas 2021. Ever since then, it's been this slow upward trajectory of the movie. So like post to Reddit, get bought by distributor, and then like get selected for Fantasia, get some good reviews out of Fantasia, Shudder buys it, and the movie gets pirated.
Yeah. Well, we're going to ask you about that.
Movie blows up because of piracy. Movie blows up. Yeah. So let me explain the piracy thing.
Awesome.
Shortly after Fantasia, we sent the movie to Shudder, and Shudder was like, done, right? Like they fell in love with it right away and said, we want to make it a Shudder original. And I felt like, oh, I've won the horror filmmaker lottery, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're like, we want to release Halloween 2023. I'm like, awesome. Halloween release. Lots of time for me to start thinking about my next project. This is perfect, right? And in the meantime, it'll play like all these festivals, So we started playing some European festivals, and I got really excited about the European festivals. Like each country where it was a new premiere, I would do like a new poster saying like the movie that shocked Fantasia comes to Europe, or like, and then the movie that shot, or like for Wales, which was our UK premiere, I did because I had gotten so many messages from people in the UK saying, when's it going to come to the UK? I just wrote in Welsh words, finally, and had like a poster for Wales. Like I did and then after the piracy, I was so heartbroken, like I stopped doing a poster for each festival. But so we played at a festival in Spain. I don't want to say the name of the festival because I don't think it's the festival's fault, and I don't want like them to get a bad reputation. It 100% wasn't the film festival's fault. So basically at the Spanish festival, the film was part of their online portion, and it wasn't like a pay-per-view thing where we play a movie at a certain time, and if you don't watch it, you don't watch it. Like it was free. It was not free. It was able to watch for the entire duration of the film festival on demand through a streaming service called Filmin, which is like a Spanish language streaming service. So it was up for about 24 hours. And then I saw on Twitter the entire slate of films from that festival had been pirated.
Wow.
So I contacted my distributor. Yeah, and it sucks too, because all those, like, we had a great, like, I think in this circumstance, piracy definitely helped our particular movie. The other films on the slate, I don't know if that's the case. Like, I don't think they had Shudder deals signed on the dotted line. So I think there was another Trauma movie on the slate that got pirated. It was bad. But so movie got pirated. I emailed the distributor because I saw on Twitter that it was pirated. They emailed the festival, and within, I think, about 48 hours of the online portion being up, they closed it. So they took all the movies down. They issued an apology statement. blah, blah, blah. If you bought, like pass tickets for the online portion, here's where you can get your refund. We're very sorry. And I asked my distributor, hey, don't you think we should tell Shudder? Like a Shudder original was leaked, and they said, let's wait and see. And I'm like, okay. And so I was panicked because I don't know how distribution works. I know a little bit more now, but I thought, like, what if Shudder rips up the deal, right? So I gradually panic more and more. And also, in the meantime, the movie starts going viral, right? So people on Twitter, all over social media, are talking about the movie. And I think I can't engage with this because, let's say a lot of people did fan art. I thought, okay, if I retweet this fan art, more people will seek out the movie, more people will pirate the movie. More likely Shudder's going to find out and rip up the deal, right? So I had a 3-week emotional meltdown, right? Like, I felt like the movie had gone so high and it was all collapsing. And also, I was in a horrible position, too, of people saying, I love your movie. Here's my fan art. Your movie means so much to me, and feeling like I can't engage with it, right? So also, it was around Halloween, and so it ruined my fucking Halloween. I was going to go as a sexy... Have you guys seen the movie Nope?
Yes.
So I was going to go as a sexy Gordy from Nope. But I couldn't because I was so, like, destroyed. Like, I didn't go out. I didn't do anything. So about 2-3 weeks after the movie was pirated, one of my executive producers emailed me and said, okay, Shudder knows about the leak. Don't worry about it. They're not going to rip up the contract or anything. You should be getting an email from them soon. Then Sam emailed me at Shudder, great guy. He said, hey, we're going to have a meeting soon to discuss release and everything. By the way, we know about the piracy. Don't worry about it. We'll support you. We love the movie, blah, blah, blah. So I have the meeting with Shudder, and they're like, okay, so we're going to bump up the release to maybe February, January instead of Halloween, and that's it, right? So that was a huge relief. Variety does a press release saying Shudder's bought the movie, more Steam builds, and then the movie comes out January 13th, and we do like 800,000 on the first weekend, and shortly do 1 million, and it's like, oh my god, it's perfect, right? And so I would say in this particular circumstance, number one, the vast majority of the people who pirated the movie didn't know, like, oh, they have a Shudder deal, didn't know, okay, the filmmaker doesn't want us to pirate the movie. Like, they thought that, like, A, they had just found a movie and fell in love with it, right?
Okay.
B, they maybe thought, well, we're helping support this, like, tiny movie by talking about it, right? So I want to be clear, I'm not upset with the people who pirated the movie. They didn't know any of this. Also, since the movie's come, like, released, like, it's been clear that they helped trumpet the movie and get people into the theater, right? And I've seen a lot of people on Twitter who pirated the movie buy a ticket in lieu just to support the movie, to support me, right? So thank you to them. The only people I don't like is the people who pirated the movie and vocally said that they hated the movie on Twitter, because, like, if you pirate a movie and shit on it, maybe wait till it's out before shitting on it, right? And also, it's not like we can give you a refund, right? So, so that's my thing in a nutshell. In this particular circumstance, piracy helped the movie, and in this particular circumstance, I'm happy with the people who pirated the movie and said they loved it. Thank you so much. no matter how you saw the movie, if you love, like whether you pirated it, watched it on Shudder, watched it in the theater, if you loved it, thank you so much.
That's really interesting. Shout out to Shudder as well, because they really kept the deal. They were very, very nice about that. So if I may ask, maybe you don't know, which is fine. So if they knew that if they knew that it was leaked, the deal would fall through, because they might think that you leaked it on purpose.
I don't know. Because number one, I haven't seen, and this is like a standard thing, right? I have a contract with Bayview Entertainment, and Bayview Entertainment has a contract with Shudder. I could ask to see the contract that Bayview did with Shudder. I think that's within my rights, but I just haven't. So I don't know what's all involved in the Shudder contract. I don't know if there's a part that says if the movie's leaked, we have the right to do this or blah blah blah. I will say most streaming services are aware of the realities of piracy. They're less naive about piracy than people would assume. But the thing is, I didn't know. I went from doing data entry for minimum wage to being thrust into the middle of like a distribution, piracy, Twitter drama fiasco, right? So yeah. But Shudder was great through the whole thing. What I do want to say though is to other young filmmakers out there, don't take this as a case example. Don't think, okay, I can have my movie leak and then I'll still get a streaming deal. That may not be the case. In this particular circumstance, we had signed the streaming deal well before it was leaked. Also, in this circumstance too, Shudder was told the movie is going to play at an online festival in Europe. Is that okay? And Shudder said yes, right? So this is a unique situation. Don't use this as a case study for your particular film, right? But Shudder's been amazing through this whole process. Everyone at AMC Networks has been amazing through this whole process.
Awesome. No, okay, so the really important thing here is you already had a deal. If you didn't have a deal, that's no streaming service. So I wanted to ask you then.
Well, and you may still be able to get one. I don't know these things. Another big thing too, Shudder is different than other streaming services. Like in my experience, they're very down to earth. They're very audience conscious. They're very good to their filmmakers, and I don't know if that's the case for like other streaming services like Netflix or HBO Max, right? Like Shudder's kind of a unique little baby. Yeah, they are under a giant conglomerate, but they're kind of kept at arm's length. So
okay. So speaking of the movie in itself, what would you say? Did you have an inspiration after all? Maybe you didn't have an inspiration. You said, okay, no, I see this movie, I like this movie, but I want to go a completely different direction. What would you say it was that inspiration?
So I've done a lot of these interviews and this question always comes up, and I had kind of a canned answer just to make it easy, and it was people on my YouTube channel, when they would describe a nightmare, people kept describing the same dream. So, and I think everyone has had this nightmare. It's a nightmare you have in childhood between the ages of 6 and 10, where you're at your house, your parents are either dead or missing, and there's a monster, and you as a single child have to deal with the monster, right? I'd say about half of the dreams that people described on my channel were iterations of that exact dream, and eerily always seem to happen around the same age, right? So that definitely was a major inspiration for the framing of it. With that being said, I think that's only about 10-15% of what made me want to make this movie and influence the movie, right? There are so many things that went into this movie that I'm not even 100% conscious of. as far as style, mood, feelings, and there's little things that inspired big things, right? So a little thing. Wouldn't it be cool to do a scene similar to the Room 237 scene in The Shining? And just that little thing created a big thing of that was basically the crux of doing the entire look under the bed scene. But other things went into the look under the bed scene. Other things too, like I'm sure if you analyze like what, like there's even things like the Syrian war that like went into influencing it, or like things that happen in the world, or things I'm not 100% cognizant of. So really it's so many different things. And as far as the aesthetic and feel, ever since I was a little kid, I was always conscious of, I really like old movies because they make you feel different things, right? And as a little kid, I was always jealous of filmmakers from the 70s, the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, because they got to direct old movies, and now we don't do that anymore. And I always thought, why can't we still direct old movies? Why can't we keep making old movies if we want to? So that was another thing too. I said, what if I did a movie from the 70s today?
Sort of a like grindhouse sort of aesthetic, you mean? Okay.
Yeah, the grindhouse, but even more like kind of the more elegant horror movies from the 70s, like Black Christmas or The Exorcist, or not so much in theme, but just as far as feeling, like stuff like what's the one? Last House on the Left.
Okay.
Or stuff like that.
That's great. Okay. By the way, that scene was one of my favorite scenes in the movies. Like that,
Thank you so much.
It was very.
Same.
It was one of the.
Very good.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask.
I've seen a few.
You go for it.
I've seen a few reviewers who didn't like the movie, but still were like, that particular scene they think is good. So like even people who didn't like the movie as a whole, they like that scene.
Okay. I wanted to ask. You mentioned that the audience loved it. What made them love it more? What is it that? That's a very strong word. They loved this movie.
Just judging from the messages I've got and the tweets I got, is people take the movie personally. And I think it has to do with the movie was so personal for me. And if you make a movie that's really personal, people will respond to it, because people at the end of the day are more similar than not, right? So I think there's a misconception to do a movie that an audience will respond to. You have to be as broad as possible. That's not the case at all. You have to make something super personal to you for an audience to respond. I think a little bit of it comes from a director's ego, that they think, oh, my perspective, my feelings are so different than the average film goer. And that's not the case at all. What I've seen too, so I think a big thing with this, because we never see the actors' faces, because everything's implied, because everything's kind of peeking around a corner or looking over here or looking over there, it's not that we're watching other people in a movie. It feels like we're in the house with the kids, right? And there's different versions of that too. So there's parts where it feels like maybe we're the monster looking at the kids, and there's other parts where it feels like we're looking at things through the kids' eyes. And I think that particular experiment works for about 75% of the people watching the movie. Maybe less, maybe more. I don't know. Okay. And because it feels like a personalized copy, people respond to it, and it brings them back to when they were 6 years old and the house they lived in, which is not so scary and not so big, feels really scary and feels really big.
Okay, so this is an important aspect about is like your movie was made at a very small budget, like 15,000 Canadian dollars, and it made 1.5 million at the box office. So, first of all, can you give us half of that million, please, so that we can try to do something over here, please?
I don't even think I'm gonna get half of that because I don't know how the contract breaks down, right? So my contract is, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the specifics of the contract, but I get a certain percentage of what my distributor Bayview Entertainment gets, and they get a certain percentage of what Shudder rakes in. Right? Okay. Shudder and IFC Midnight, I should say. So I don't know how much of that money I'm actually going to get till I get my big payout in May.
Okay.
So
now that's a good behind the scenes speak of how like you make profit as a filmmaker. But actually, you said there was this kind of trajectory about it where it's just like blew up. Now you seem that it's much more stable, so to speak. So, and you said you went to LA speaking to filmmakers and other people over there.
Yeah. So Shudder and IFC wanted to do a theatrical screening in LA to coincide with the Do I have time to just talk about that story in itself?
Sure, of course. Go for it.
So, they wanted to do a screening in LA for the streaming premiere on February 2nd, right? So, I'd never been out of the country before, and I didn't have a passport, and Shudder was like, okay, we'll book the flights and everything refundable, so that if you can't get your passport in time, we'll just do something through Zoom or something. We'll still have the event, though. So, and they told me we'll set up the theater to like maybe have TVs playing with cartoons and Lego around to really sell the atmosphere of the movie, right? So I was able to get the passport renewed in time, and that was cool too. When I went to get my passport renewed, like I showed them my documents and a letter from IFC saying, hey, here's why he needs to come to the United States. So if you could expedite the process. And so the government official was looking at my documents and he's like, are you the Skinamarink guy? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, this is the Skinamarink. It's so cool. So, and they're like, right. And so I got my passport renewed quickly. I flew out of my country for the first time. I cried on the plane because I'm a bad flyer, and also like, you know, the like video that says like tuck your if in the event of an impact, like put your head blah blah blah, mass drop down. For that video, Air Canada has a video play where it shows all the different beautiful parts of Canada, and it made me cry because I'm like, I'm leaving my country for the first time, and I was crying. I wasn't a good flyer. I was like, yeah. So I get to LA, get to the hotel, check in, blah blah blah. And the day of the event, they bring me to the theater, which is right next door. I come in and they've recreated the living room from the movie in the theater, like eerily well. They've changed all the light bulbs in the theater to blue light bulbs. They have TVs everywhere with Lego. Oh, and it's this ornate movie palace that Charlie Chaplin built. It was insane. Then they introduced me to Patton Oswalt, because he's doing the intro and the Q&A. I'm a big Patton Oswalt fan too. Like, I've listened to his comedy albums since I was a teenager. It was a whole thing. It was the best night of my life. They took all these photos of me. I felt like a celebrity. It was insane. Barbara Crampton was there. The Canadian consulate showed up and got a picture. It was like, oh my God. David Lynch's people sent a box. It was, so that was it was maybe the best night of my life. And then I got like the drunkest I've ever been. And
well deserved.
And then the morning after, I was the most hungover I've ever been. And I had to go to West Hollywood for a meeting. But, and had to go incredibly hungover. It was great. So that was my whole experience of going to Los Angeles.
Well, and cheers for more to come.
Oh,
I mean,
I was in the Jackie Brown hallway?
Yeah.
I was in that was my first thing in the airport. I got to the Jackie Brown hallway and I'm like, this is the Jackie Brown hallway. And then the power went out. And the Jackie Brown hallway is underground. There's no windows. So it was like, oh, wow, the Jackie. And then the power. And I screamed, what the fuck? What the fuck? And this woman was like, it's fine. It'll come back on in a minute. And I'm like, is this normal when you come to an American airport? The power just goes up. And I'm like, I've never been. I was like, is this what an earthquake feels like? What's going? And then the power went on again. And yeah.
Oh, America.
Oh, America.
So I want to go now to the choices that you made as a filmmaker. So obviously, I think you really mastered the art of letting the imagination do the work. Like the things in particular is like you try to focus into the dark and you start seeing things like moving even if there is not there. However, the movie is particularly, I think it's a comment that you received a lot, that it's slow, and there's also that kind of retro aesthetic with the crackling sound and the noise picture. So those were deliberate choices, right?
Yeah. So I had discovered even through my YouTube channel that if you let an audience sit for a while, A, they're more patient than people give them credit for, and B, people will get in their own head about things. If you just have a blank hallway with nothing there, people will start listening for things and lean in, and their imagination will start going wild. And there's even like weird science behind this. Like there's a experiment where if you sit in a quiet room with a mirror and just normal light and stare at the mirror long enough, eventually you will start to hallucinate. So like your mind will start playing tricks on you. I also, as far as slowness, I wanted to play with the idea of kind of an uncanniness, right? Like I had this idea in my head, like what if the movie was edited by AI? Like what if you gave an AI, like just fed them 70s horror movie and some instructions and they edited a movie? They would do weird stuff, like they would focus on weird things, or they would hold a shot for too long, or they would do stuff like that, and it would feel unnerving because it would feel like a human did not cut this movie, something else cut this movie, right? There was a little bit of inspiration from Dogma 95 in this too. So,
okay.
Dancer in the Dark by Lars von Trier?
Of course, yeah.
So he had briefly experimented with something with this, where for a few of the musical scenes they had set the bridge scene in particular, the I've Seen It All scene. He wanted to do an experiment where they had like 50 cameras, digital cameras set up, and just got a machine to cut at random. And there's a little bit of that in Dancer in the Dark. They found out it didn't quite work because, again, a computer doesn't know, right? But I wanted to do a little bit of that. I wanted there to be an element of frustration and discomfort. And why aren't we cutting to the next scene? Why are we looking at the ceiling? Why are we doing this? I wanted it to feel like a little weird. Like why did the editor do this? Right? So
that's it. Now, actually, you are right about the. For a second, it's like I thought it was a movie made by the monster. That was also it did work for me. For a second, it's like, wait, are we seeing the movie that the monster made, or so? Okay, it worked.
Yeah.
In my case, how about you guys? Do you have anything to ask to Mr. Kyle over here?
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I've got a couple. You mentioned like you said, showing an AI 70s movies, and maybe that an AI should make a movie. What was it that got you so invested in horror? Like, I speak for myself, I'm a lover of the horror genre as well, but what was it for you?
So my first thing that got me into like horror was kid-friendly horror, so Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Wow, yeah.
And then after that, because I got exposed to that at a fairly young age, my parents were fairly laxed with what horror movies me and my sister could watch. So I saw Psycho and the Birds when I think I was 7, and my parents showed me, showed us The Shining when we were 8. And thinking, because I don't think they quite remembered too, there's some gore in that movie, the Room 237. I think they just thought, oh, the kids will like this, right? And they were right, but and it was just on TV, right? So they showed us The Shining, and also they were fairly lax. Horror was like go nuts, right? Because they understood, okay, they're maybe mature enough to understand that this is just horror, right? Like, horror is its own thing. You can see people get cut up and killed because it's just horror, right? So we basically had free range to rent whatever we wanted as long as it was in the horror section, right? So, we couldn't rent, the Red Shoe Diaries or Last Tango in Paris when we were 8 years old, but horror, whatever, right? But also, we had no most 8-year-olds aren't gonna go, oh, Last Tango in Paris. I want to see a Brando in 60s, right? So, and then gradually I had exhausted so much horror by 13, 14 that I started getting into just, cinema, right? So I started watching Ozu, Kurosawa. I loved Kurosawa when I was 12, 13. Fritz Lang, all the Kubrick shit. I think I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey when I was maybe 9, right? So I got into Kubrick really young, when I was in single digit. 2001: A Space Odyssey was a profound movie going experience for me. I saw it on this TV about this big when I was 9, and I felt like it was a movie made just for me, and I felt like this. I've always wondered, what if they did a movie like this that felt like this, even though I didn't quite understand what it was talking to in me. And I always, since then, I thought I don't even know how to describe it. It was just, it felt like this is what movies should be like, not like a play. It should be like this. It should be all about feelings and color, and it should be like music, right? And then horror came in and out of my life, but it was always there, right? I always, deep down, even though I explored non-horror in cinema, it always comes back to horror, and that was always my thing. I always want to do horror. Another thing, too, was watching The Exorcist when I was little, way too young. And my parents educated me about the history of The Exorcist and how it was supposedly the scariest movie ever made. And when people went to it, they fainted and all that. And that always stuck with me. I always thought, I want to do that. Because before, there was arbitrary things that said this movie is good, right? So this movie's won Best Picture. This movie's won #1 at the box office. But The Exorcist was different. It felt like a quantifiable thing that was objective. It felt like, this is objectively the scariest movie because people fainted. People couldn't deal with this movie, right? And in my mind, I always said, I want to do that. I want to make a movie that people say, this is the scariest thing. I want to have that trophy, right? And it's hard because now some people have, mostly teenagers, right, have said, oh, this is the scariest thing I've seen, right? But I think the age of The Exorcist has passed because the monoculture doesn't exist anymore. So you can no longer do the scariest movie ever made. You can only do a movie that's the scariest movie ever made for a certain group of people.
Awesome. I just have one more question, and I hope it's a polite one to ask. But on the topic of horror, filmmakers and storytellers normally use it to delve into the very unseedy parts of humanity. And after watching the film, I did get this kind of vibe, but I've been seeing a lot of articles online and opinions about people saying that they saw like an allegory for sexual abuse in this film, that maybe the child is suffering. Is that something that you intended, or is it just simply an interpretation that people are seeing?
So from the beginning, I wanted to make a movie that people could interpret in a million different ways and interpret for themselves, right? So when I wrote it, there are certain parts of it that I said, okay, this is what I think the backstory is, but I never want to say what it is because I want every person who watches it to interpret it for themselves, right? And I knew some people would interpret it as being about abuse or sexual abuse of children or domestic violence or a mother who's deceased or parents who are separated. From the get-go, I wanted people to interpret it in a million different ways because the way the audience is going to interpret it is a billion times more interesting, I should say, than what I have in my head. So everyone who interprets it a particular way, they're correct because it's not important. What I think the movie is about is completely irrelevant because it's not my movie anymore. It's your movie now. So if people interpreted this movie as being about sexual abuse, they're correct. If people interpreted this as not being about sexual abuse, they're correct. If they think it's about divorce, they're correct. If they think it's about abuse, they're correct. If they think it's about a dollhouse, they're correct. If they think the movie is an allegory for Star Trek The Next Generation, they're correct. Every interpretation is true. You can't tell someone you're wrong. It's art. It's subjective, right? So I'm happy that people have interpreted it in their own way. I will never say that's wrong. It's not about that because I can't.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
That is really interesting. And I think that's a good segue to a question I really wanted to ask, which was, I'm sure that people's childhood will really affect their interpretation of this movie. In my case, watching this movie, I always kept on thinking that fear I had whenever I was in my house. It was really dark and I was trying to sleep, but I couldn't because every small sound I could hear was like, oh my God, what's that? And I would always want to go and sleep next to my parents. Another thing that's really scared me when I was young and still to this day is the fear of claustrophobia. So the lack of doors and windows in this movie for me was, wow. Where does this idea come from, the removing the doors and windows?
So it's actually, here's an interesting thing because usually with things, it's all of the above. So there's a spark and then it's like, oh, and that'll be good for this, right? So in horror movies, it's always hard to think, how do I keep them in the scary place, right? So The Shining is a great example of this. They're snowed in, right? Easy, right? It works for the story. It's not unbelievable. It's perfect, right? The Thing, another good example. They're in Antarctica. They can't just like hop on a bus, right? But it's difficult getting people to stay in the haunted house, right? Because most people would just leave, right? So I had all these things of how do I keep the kids in the house? If this was me and my sister, we would leave. We would go, even if our parents were gone, we would go to the neighbors, right? Then one day I thought, okay, you're overthinking this. Just make the monster get rid of the windows and doors, right? Simple as that. And that's a neat thing, right? I think there's been other movies that have done similar stuff. So for example, this is a tenuous thing, but in Demons, when they tried to leave, like they they see that all the walls have been bricked up, right? Doors have been bricked up. Or in one of the VHS movies, I think it was VHS 2, they're at a house and they try to leave, and you literally see the windows disappear in real time. It's really good effect.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, remember that? Yeah. Oh, it was such a creepy effect too. You literally just see a window disappear slowly. It's so neat. Yeah. So I said, hey, what if the monster's just like, doors and windows are gone, your parents are gone, right? And I thought this movie's weird enough and amorphous enough that it'll work, right? So then after I came up with that, I thought, okay, this works for other things. This is claustrophobic. This is eerie. This is uncanny. Also, it fits into the childlike, dreamlike logic, right? Like, oh, and then like a little kid describing a nightmare. Oh, and then all the windows and doors were gone, right? So it worked for everything all at once.
Damn, that's really interesting. One more thing I wanted to ask you about was the dialogue. There are many situations in your movie where it's basically almost intelligible or completely intelligible, and you in fact added subtitles. What was the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so I was inspired by analog horror on the internet, which a lot of times it'll be either a real recording of a situation or a intentionally poorly recorded thing that has titles, right? Another thing was real life 911 phone calls are all in text, right? Because it's quite unintelligible, particularly the 911 phone call scene the phone call, I don't want to spoil anything, the phone call that's in the movie that has titles, that was inspired by YouTube videos of real instances of that. So then that was fermenting in my mind, and then I thought, oh, this will be interesting because I can do stuff like have a scene where we're aware someone's talking, but they're maybe too quiet, but we can still understand them, right? I just thought that would be a neat thing to explore. And then I also thought, okay, child actors, they don't enunciate like adults do. So if the child actor messes up their lines, I have an easy out, right? So again, it was all of the above, right?
Yeah. Okay. And one last question from me, and then I can lead on back to Franco, who has another question, I believe. We've talked a lot about viewers' interpretation of your movie, but for Kyle Edward Ball, what is Skinamarink?
Oh, I can't answer that because then I feel like it will unfairly bias people's interpretation, right? So,
but actually, it's
there's even like there's.
Go ahead.
What is Skinamarink? So I don't know. So in America and Canada, it's a children's song.
Oh.
So it's are you guys familiar with it at all?
Nope.
So.
It's a children's song. So it was originally a folk song from the 19th century, and the first time it appears in print is a musical in the United Kingdom, and then it circled back to being a traditional folk song in the early 20th century. And then eventually a children's song. It goes, Skinamarink-y dinky dink, Skinamarink-y doo, I love you. And so it was popularized in the 1980s by a Canadian children's entertainment group called Sharon, Lois, and Bram. And also there's different so in America it's traditionally Skinamarink. And then in Canada, it was changed to Skinamarink.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it in a movie from the 1950s when I was thinking of a working title for the movie. And I thought, oh, this could be a great working title because it's nonsense. It evokes childhood. It also sounds vaguely horror because it has skin at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
I thought, okay, so it checks all these boxes. Also, it sticks in your head, right? Like it's a word that it has a hard k sound in it. So, and supposedly there's magic to the k sound. Like, at some point, the two most recognizable brands in the world, this is long past, but the two most recognizable brands were Coca-Cola and Kodak. So there's, in theory, psychology there. I think that's long past. But probably the most recognizable now might be Facebook, right?
Yeah.
So who knows? But so I thought, okay, this will be a great working title. Eventually I'll come up with a real name, but it just stuck. So it was a working title that became the title.
Title. Oh, okay. It works.
Great.
So,
Franco.
yeah, this is my last question. Also, I have to say, I have to comment, it's really interesting how you really didn't limit yourself. I noticed that you were very interested in just, okay, I have an idea, go for it. Let's see what works. And I have to comment that it's a really good lesson that I took from interviewing you. And obviously, the final question would be future plans. What have you got ahead now?
Yeah. So I had some ideas for movies that I wanted to write and direct. And originally I was supposed to be writing it right now because, again, we were going to release Halloween 2023. So it was a perfect, like, big window for me to start working away on the next one. But since the release of the movie was pushed up so much, I haven't had time to fully solidify my idea and what I'm going to write into it. Also, I made the mistake of telling people two of my ideas, and as I told more people, I fell out of love with them, even though people were very receptive to them. So I have another idea that I'm batting around, but it's going different places in my mind. And also, I have this kind of good problem of the first one did so well for such a first-time filmmaker that the second one feels like it needs to be even better. I'm also dealing with, okay, I have to, if I go too different than this one, people will say, well, we liked your first one more. Why did you go so far away?
Yeah.
Or if I make it too similar, it's like, well, we've seen that before. Like, and it's hard too because people talked about how unique this one was, that I felt like I made lightning in a bottle and I can't make Skinamarink again, right? So I don't know. I will tell you that since the success of the movie, Hollywood's come knocking fairly substantially. I've had Zoom meetings with almost every major production entity with the exception of Disney and Blumhouse. Although Blumhouse did I love Blumhouse.
Blumhouse is good. Disney don't do Disney.
We love Blumhouse. We love Blumhouse here.
I've also said in this whole experience, I've decided I'm never publicly ever going to say anything negative about any movie ever again, right? In private, I might, but I'm only going to say nice things because that's not my job. I'm not a film critic. I'm a filmmaker. But every company except Disney has contacted me. In early March, I have a Zoom meeting with someone at Universal. So that's cool. But just to say hi. But I'm fairly substantial talks with a fairly recognizable production company. I can't say who, and I'm pretty sure they're going to make my next one. So getting my next one made is not that big of a challenge. The biggest thing is me writing it and coming up with it. So all I can say is stay tuned.
Awesome.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that.
And we look forward to have you back on the podcast to speak about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So back to you,
Is that
Andrea.
it, Franco?
Back to you, Andrea.
So thank you so much, Kyle, for finding the time to be on our podcast. I hope you enjoyed your 1 hour here. Sorry we interrupted your thinking time for your next movie?
Oh, that's fine. I'll probably
sure.
start in like towards the end of March, right? I'm just sort of slowly ending the amount of interviews I do, and then I'll take time to
You deserve a bit of a calm down, I'm sure.
For sure.
Most definitely.
This is maybe the 70th interview I've done.
Oh my God.
And like this is maybe the 10th, 11th podcast. And today, like at 5, I have a YouTuber.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Interesting.
Hi, YouTuber.
Great.
We did it before you.
So, all right. So before I give you your chance to give your final comments, I'd like to make an appeal to all our viewers, especially our Maltese viewers. Check out Shudder. You need to use a VPN. Unfortunately, it's not available in Malta, so use a VPN to get on the Shudder. And watch Skinamarink. It's an experience, trust me. It's definitely not for everyone, but for lovers of horror, Skinamarink is definitely an experience. So this is an appeal for everyone to check it out on Shudder. Kyle, it's been a blast. I don't know if you have any final comments you'd like to make.
Coming back to Malta, we did have a meeting with a broad foreign distributor, so a company that instead of going to this country, they just sell it broadly to all these different distributors in different languages. So hopefully we'll have a wide international release in all these different countries and all these different languages sooner than later.
Awesome. That would be great.
Including Malta and the rest of Europe.
Because I'd love to watch this in a cinema, to be honest.
Yeah,
I'd love to watch this in a cinema.
I don't know if we'll get a cinema release everywhere, but like fingers crossed, you know.
Okay.
I'd love to watch this in the cinema. Because although to be fair, I do think it's an experience watching it in your room in the dark.
Yeah.
Perfect silence.
I
will
felt like I was
say,
watching
like-
something illegal.
Yeah. I will say the theatrical screenings are insane because it's so quiet and then it just blasts you and then it's just quiet again.
Yeah.
So it's such a eerily immersive experience in a theater.
Imagine someone sneezes.
There are moments where I thought my speakers were going to explode.
Yeah.
Oh no.
That's because I'm not good at I'm not the best at sound mixing, and I literally brought it up to like the farthest you would get without peaking, right? Like
okay.
so yeah.
That explains. Great stuff. Franco, you wanted to say something?
No, imagine someone sneezes during those quiet moments. Actually, if you want, me and Joe can help you with your next movie, right, Joe?
Yeah, we'd absolutely love to.
Love to.
I'll come to Canada for that. It's not that far from Scotland.
Well, that's it for us.
Great stuff.
That's it for
All right,
us.
guys. I think we can end it here. It's been a pleasure to have you on our podcast, Kyle. Thank you.
Thank you,
taking your time.
Malta.
And it's been a blast. Thank you so much. Ciao,
Ciao.
guys. And let us know in the comment section below. What do you think about this interview? Have you watched Skinamarink? Let us know. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and all the usual stuff. Ciao.
See ya.
Bye.